speak, but we have realized that water as a natural resource is a scarce resource, and the stories that media has been covering regarding rainwater, we thought, you know what, let's just call a media briefing where we'll be able to provide information and afford journalists and reporters an opportunity to ask questions. But before we proceed, I would like to also welcome and acknowledge our leadership here. We have Ntate Joala here, Mr. Debo Joala, who's the Chief Shared Service Officer. I'm just going to go in order. Ntate Joala. And then next to Ntate Joala, we have our CE, Mr. Sipho Msai, our Chief Executive, Mr. Sipho Msai. And next to our CE, we have the Chairperson of the Rainwater Board, Mr. Ramadeu Munyokolo. And next to Mr. Munyokolo, we have our COO, Chief Operating Officer, Mr. Mahlomola Mehlo. And next to Mr. Mehlo, we have our General Manager responsible for operations, Mr. Simon Kala. And we also have in our midst Ms. Nyembe, who's our CFO. She's sitting right at the back. And we also have our Chief Strategist, Mr. Kubeka. I would also want to welcome you all and thank you very much for honoring and being here today. Without wasting any time, I would like to welcome and call upon stage here. I'm going to welcome Ntate Joala, but before Ntate Joala, I want to see if Mr. Chere is here, who's going to give us a safety protocol. Mr. Chere, are you here, sir? Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I am Sizo Mahlangu. We apologize on behalf of Mr. Chere from the Shared Department. I'm going to take you through our rainwater emergency briefing. In case of an emergency, if you are going to hear an emergency siren, please do not panic. Know that you are at level 5, and also try to remember or recall your route. Stop everything that you are doing. Do not run, just walk as fast as you can. Do not use the lift. Do not go to entrances that we use every day. Evacuate along the safe route at the emergency door. Break the glass door with a lock hammer provided. Go to the assembly point and report to the relevant zone warden. Wait for further instructions, and when all clear alarm sounds, we will be free to return to work. Please make sure to use this door right on the left. The other one is on the right. There is immediately as you exit this door, on the second door, please descend right to level 1. Then we will show you where is the assembly point. The ladies is on the right, the ladies is on the left, and the gents is on the right. We have made sure that this venue also complies to the COVID-19 protocols. Please keep one seat in between. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Without wasting any time, I'm just going to move right along so that we don't waste time. I'm going to call Mr. Debo Joala, who is our Chief Shared Service Officer. He's going to introduce the chairperson of the board. After the chairperson has spoken, then the CE is going to come through and give us a presentation, the main presentation for the day. Then we're going to have a Q&A session where we're going to afford you an opportunity to ask questions, and then the panelists here will be able to answer your questions. So, Mr. Joala, over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Makinosi. Mine is not a long process. I just need to really introduce the chairperson of the board of Rainwater, Ntate Ramadeu Munyokolo, who will take us through the water value chain from his perspective and perspective of the board, and after which the Chief Executive, Ntate Sipho Msai, will come and give us a detailed presentation around the business of Rainwater. Without further ado, let me ask Ntate Munyokolo to come and give us the opening remarks. Thank you very much.
Madam colleagues, we met with the Minister early last week, and we raised the issue with the minister to assist us to interact with municipalities. And in our interaction with the municipalities, we actually shared the challenges that we face in the water value chain. And the minister obliged and we met with the municipalities. The municipalities, you must confess, they were very cooperative in terms of appreciating the challenges that we have, one of which was the loss of 40% of the water out of our system, from out into in the distribution systems. The CEO will explain that further, and also the need to set up the water. We prefer not to call it the water room. We prefer not to call it the war room, but to call it the water room. To set up the water room here at Rainwater, where we coordinate all these activities to mitigate against the challenge that we have. We then decided to call this briefing because we realized that in most instances, we have not yet interacted with the media and give them an appreciation of who we are and what we do, and also brief the public, because the media is the mouthpiece of the public. To that extent, we want to clarify the issues around the non-revenue water that has been spoken about in the recent days. We also want to clarify the issue of our role in the whole water system, from abstraction to when we give the water to municipalities, so that there's clarity around the role of groundwater. We further want to clarify the issue of the capacity and availability of water in the system. There's issues around people saying that the dams are full to capacity, yet we say there's no water. So CE in his presentation will clarify that issue. We further want to clarify the issue of the current infrastructure of rainwater in particular, the current plans, the current activities we're involved in, and our plans moving forward up to 2030, even 2050. We also want to address the issue of the whole water purification process, so that the public understands and appreciates the activities of rainwater in relation to how water gets into their taps and the role of rainwater thereof. We want to link increased water volumes that we see in the recent months, and also the extent to which municipalities are able to pay for this increased high volume of water that they demand. And with that introduction, I want to give to the CEO, to the Chief Executive, that this Pomosai, to expatiate on the issues that are raised. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to Rainwater. If we can hop on to the next slide. I think I'll be using plenty of slides just to demonstrate the issues at hand before us today. And I think briefly this is the content of the presentation this morning. And I'm not going to run through, the chairperson has really touched bases in terms of what is it that we wanted to cover with regards to today's media briefing. If we can go on to the next slide, please. I thought I should just start by explaining who are we at Rainwater. There's plenty of confusion out there in terms of what we do, and often enough we are confused with certain things that should be done by certain water services institutions in the value chain, and I thought I should start here. Who is Rainwater and what is our footprint? In terms of our footprint, our area of operation covers 4 provinces, mainly obviously all the municipalities in Gauteng are given water by clean drinking water by Rainwater. We also provide water to parts of Northwest all the way to Rustenburg, not all of Rustenburg, but parts of Rustenburg. The rest of the Rustenburg is supplied by water, is supplied by Mkhalisu Water Board with water. We also have a footprint in the Free State. We supply water all the way to Tomate. Although our area of operation go all the way to Malutiapufung, at this point in time, we are not providing water services in there. We also have a footprint in Mpumalanga, but really, our water supply extends all the way to Kavanbegi. So we only in 4 provinces, mainly in Gauteng, all the municipalities in Gauteng, and in parts, the rest of the provinces in those 4 provinces. But who are we? Renota is a water trading entity. That's what we do. We trade with water. We buy bulk water. We buy raw water from the Department of Water and Sanitation. We clean it, and then we supply it to municipalities in bulk. We leave it at bulk reservoirs. We do not reticulate water into neighborhoods. It is not our responsibility to distribute water street by street, home by home. We supply bulk water to municipalities. The municipalities from our reservoirs then distribute it through their network of reservoirs. In fact, all municipalities have localized reservoirs. The reservoirs that you see as you drive around in your neighborhood, those are not our reservoirs. Our reservoirs are too big. You will not see them, although they're strategically located. So I think we need to understand that. We are a trading entity, we trade in water, but at bulk level. We don't sell water to individual households, although we have direct consumers, but really, with respect to municipalities, our operation ends at bulk water. So that's what we are. So we supply bulk water mainly to municipalities. We use a network of pipes that cut across the length and breadth of our value chain, and we have close, just over, north of 3,000 kilometers of this large diameter pipes through which that we supply municipalities and our consumers. Before water is sent to municipalities from our water pipes, it goes into our reservoirs. We have just under 60 of those that, as I indicated earlier, strategically located in our area of supply. On average, we supply 4,000 now, as at this financial year, 4,600 million liters of water a day, which is megaliters of water a day, and then we can peak at 5,000 for summer periods. This is where we are. I repeat, we on average supply about 4,600, but we have an infrastructure that provides for additional water for peak demands, like when we are having a situation of increased water demand beginning of September, and then we can easily peak at 5,000 million liters of water a day. We have calculated the number of consumers in our area of operation, not only in Gauteng, but across the length and breadth of our area of operation, as I shown in the previous slide, in our footprint to be around 17, just under 18 million consumers. So when we peak, we produce 5,000, roundabout million liters of water a day to roughly 17, 18 million consumers in municipalities. Of course, we are the largest water board, not only in the continent, but in the Southern Hemisphere, and we'll be celebrating 120 years next year. We supply mainly to municipalities, about 18 of them. Bulk of our water goes to those municipalities, in the north of 70, 80%. Although we have mines and industry, numerous as they may be, but they don't constitute anything close to 10% of the water that we put into the system. So about 80% of the water that we put into the system goes to the municipalities. Just to further unpack what we do, as I indicated, we are a trading entity. We are established in terms of the Water Services Act of 1997 to provide water services to water services institutions. And this includes, specifically for our instance, bulk water. The Act gives effect to Section 27 of of the Constitution of South Africa, which provides that everybody has a right to basic water and sanitation. So our role in that value chain, in terms of the legislation, is to provide bulk water. We come in and then we close the gap of taking bulk water, raw water from the dams and supplying it into the municipalities. In the value chain, there are what you call water services authorities. Those are municipalities whose responsibility is to get into agreements with us, or we get into agreements with them, because we are a water service provider and they are water services institution. So that is the legislative arrangements that we have. Municipalities are water services authority. We contract with them on a yearly basis for a long period of time as a water services provider to provide them, specifically in this instance, bulk water, not to reticulate it into households. So essentially, if we look at the Public Finance Management Act, we are classified as a Schedule 3B outfit. What does that mean? We are a state-owned entity. We are a business enterprise. What is important is that we must generate our own income and be self-sufficient. In our history of 119 years, we have not gotten a cent from the department. We don't get grants. We are on our own in terms of these pieces of legislation. So we are self-funded. We don't get any allocation from the National Fiscus, from National Treasury. We don't have an allocation in terms of divisions of a Revenue Act. It's not really applicable to us. We are on our own. We are a trading entity. So for the fact that we are a water services institution in terms of legislation does not mean that we get funds from the department or anybody for that matter to provide services. We trade. We sell water, we buy every drop of water from the department. We don't get any subsidy. And then we sell every drop of water to municipalities. So to that effect, as a board, our board has got a heightened, if you like, responsibility to make sure that this institution is sustainable in the long run. We derive our income from our paying customers rather than taxpayers. So we don't get any allocation from the fiscus. Next slide, please. Right. But this water that we buy from the Department of Water and Sanitation. So pardon me, if I say the department, I'm making the Department of Water and Sanitation. This water that we buy from the Department of Water and Sanitation, where does it come from? Where do we get it from? The water that comes from the Department of Water and Sanitation that we buy and abstract comes mainly from the Vaal Dam. So our relationship with the department starts here. We buy that water from the Department of Water and Sanitation, we purify it and supply it to the municipalities. You'll clearly see that in the next slide in terms of how then the water moves from us all the way to the municipalities. The Department of Water and Sanitation has got a number of dams that feed into the Vaal Dam. We're going to talk about why they are full and why we have a municipality still, or some municipalities or some suburbs in municipalities have got challenges. Gets water and feeds water into the Vaal Dam mainly from Katse and Mahala Dam. These dams that you see, Stekfontein, Woodstock Dam, Grootdright Dam, Bloemhof Dam, these are strategic dams. These are the dams that the department used to feed the Vaal Dam if we don't have enough water from the dams in Lesotho. Expensive to run because to put water into here you have to pump. So ideally the Vaal Dam is fed by these two dams because essentially water gravitates. It's not pumped, gravitates into the Vaal Dam from where we get it. Ladies and gentlemen, by and large, all the water that the people of Gauteng consume comes from Lesotho. South Africa does not have sufficient water resources, fresh water, in or within the country that is enough to maintain our water requirements in the now and in the future. So we need to bear that in mind. That the resources and the water that we use is the water that we catch by and large in the mountain catchments of Lesotho, and it comes down to South Africa. We don't have our own water. almost every single drop of water. 5,000 that we pick comes from Lesotho. As a result of building these dams in Lesotho, there's plans to build more dams in Lesotho. Needless to mention that as we build dams, we displace people. When we build dams in foreign countries, we destruct and destroy the environment, the fishes, they disappear. So it's really not ideal, preferably. I rather we use water sparingly than to build more and more dams in a foreign country because we are a water scarce country. So we must bear that in mind. But the water that we consume here is the water that comes from the mountain hinterlands of Lesotho. Can you change, please? So after we abstract water from the Vaal Dam, we purify it in 2 of our water treatment plants in Vereeniging. One is in Vereeniging town, the other is in a farm called Zekerbosch, still in Emfuleni. So the water from here, by and large, gravitates into a purification works, where we treat it to clean drinking water standards. After we treat water, you will appreciate this is, if you like, in the south, water has to go to the north. For us to move water from here, after we purify it, we pump it. And you'll see in the next slide, we've got plenty of engine rooms, and therefore electricity is extremely important for us, because without power, we can't pump water from where we treat it into the heartland of Gauteng and the entire area of our operation. After we pump water in here, it's still not sufficient to reach the northern parts, the eastern and the extreme west part of our area of operation. We pump it into 4 booster stations. We call them booster stations because we still need to pump it further to the east, further to the west, further to the north. So we have 4 booster stations or pumping stations. This is now here in Johannesburg, south of Johannesburg. You will see here to the west we have Ekenhof system that pumps water mainly to the municipalities in the west, Merafo and Randfontein, but also takes water all the way to Rustenburg. Part of the water that is supplied from Ekenhof also goes to Johannesburg City. So it's an intertwined and interrelated system. Our system doesn't know municipalities. Our system was built even before municipalities came on board. So the water that Rainwater produces is the water that must be shared amongst all our consumers, amongst all our municipalities. There is no system that is dedicated to one municipality. So when you have water in an area, we say use water sparingly, is because that water is interconnected with the water that the other may not have. So we must understand that Ekenhof system supplies mostly municipalities, not one municipalities to the west, and Mapleton system that you see more to the east supplies municipalities into all the way to Governor Mbeki. It also touches Ekurhuleni. It also supplies water to Tshwane. It's an integrated system. In the heart of our booster stations in here, we have Palmit and Swakopis. These 2 supply water to City of Joburg. They supply water to also Tshwane. It's an integrated system. It's a system that knows no boundaries. It's not a municipal-based system. So we have to share it. And in the next slide, you see, we have the ability to load shift in terms of where it's required as and when the need arises. Next slide. So after this slide really is intended to show our network and the connectivities of our pipe infrastructure. In the previous slide, I did say that our pipe network, it's over 3,056 kilometers that cuts across our area of operation. And this is how it runs. Here from the bottom, that's where Vaal River is. Those 2 purification works are here. From here we pump to Aikenhof, as I indicated, to the west, Mapleton to the east, and centrally Swartkopies and Palmeet through a network of interconnected pipes. This gives us flexibility to move water from one area to another, and then after that, we leave our water at bulk reservoirs, 58 that I talked about, they're up here. From here, the municipalities draw water from our reservoirs into their reservoirs, into the households. We do not dictate how the municipalities must operate their system. The water that we leave in here, the municipalities draw from that water and reticulate. We do not determine which suburb must have water, which suburb must not have water. It is the municipality's responsibility to work out the modalities of where water must come and how to manage it when it leaves our reservoirs. So essentially our operations then stops at this point, at the bulk level, not at the household level, not at the consumer level, not at local distribution network level. So after we purify that water that goes to the municipalities, I thought here I should just show you where does the water really end up in terms of our customer profile in relation to the municipalities. 36% of the water that we produce goes to the city of Johannesburg. 24% of the water that we produce goes to Ekurhuleni. 15% of the water that we produce goes to Tshwane. Distant fourth, it's Mfuleni. Other municipality, as I indicated, mines and industry do not even make 10% of the water that we produce. So bulk of the water, or most of the water that we produce, goes to Tshwane, Ekurhuleni, City of Johannesburg, Ekurhuleni, and Tshwane in that order. So in here, I'm trying to summarize the long story that I've already shared with you. We get water from the Val Dam. I'm trying to do it now differently pictorially, to our water treatment works, to our reservoirs, to the municipalities. Swartkopies, Aikenhof, Federation system, suppliers produce 1,200, and from Swartkop, Zweikelbosch, which provides two-thirds of our water, provides 3,800 milliliters of water a day. We have various sizes of reservoirs, the smallest being Stompie's Fontaine. As the name says it all, it's about 10 megaliters of water storage. And the biggest, which is somewhere in this area, it's about 650 milliliter capacity reservoir. There's a difference between a reservoir and a dam. A dam is an infrastructure where we have put a wall in the water body to catch raw water. A reservoir, it's a storage tank that stores clean drinking water. So it's often confused. There's a difference between a dam and a reservoir. When you talk within South African context, I must add, when we talk about reservoirs, we're talking about clean water that we store in water tanks, largely in South Africa, because we love our civil engineers. They are concrete reservoirs. Right. What we do as rainwater in terms of our infrastructure, because there are a lot of questions of saying, but you should have seen this. Why did you not do anything about it? Why did you not have plans? You should plan ahead. You should see these things coming. Ladies and gentlemen, we know and we saw this coming not only for this summer, but for many, many moons to come. What we produce on an annual basis in rainwater is what we call integrated development plan. This is a 5-year plan. We review it on an annual basis, so it's a rolling 5-year plan. We look closely at the demand from our municipalities. We get those demands from our municipalities. We put them into our infrastructure plan, and then we make a determination of what needs to be upgraded, what needs to be refurbished, and what needs to be maintained. I repeat, the demands for what we get from the municipality, we put them into our planning cycle and therefore our budget. We plan for those, and then we upgrade, refurbish, operate our infrastructure in relation to that. We just don't wake up and decide we're upgrading a plant. It's demand driven. And it's not this year, only look next year, but we look into the future. That is what our infrastructure development plan does. It looks into the whole, if you can move on to the next cycle, it moves into the whole asset life cycle management strategy that we have adopted in rainwater. This cycle is ongoing and never ending. That is why it's a cycle. At every given time, we are designing for the new infrastructure. We have raw materials on site. We are constructing plants, pipes, reservoir, and then we see some of the cycles. We operate, we repair and maintain. Many of you have been with us when we are maintaining and laying infrastructure. And then we dispose, we replace. This cycle is continuously happening. We are continuously constructing. We are continuously operating. We are continuously repairing. We are continuously maintaining. This is what informs our capital budget. This is what informs what we're currently doing and what we're doing going forward. We keep an eye on it at all material time. If anything, we have a subcommittee of the board called Infrastructure, Capital Infrastructure Committee that looks at this very closely all the time. We also factor issues of affordability by the municipalities in terms of the demands that they require of water to put into the system. Next slide, please. Right, after we have taken those demands, we then say, what does this mean in terms of our capital program, in terms of our infrastructure going forward? On an annual basis, we spend close to 3 billion to upgrade, refurbish, operate, and maintain our infrastructure. Already, we have a 5-year plan. Our estimate is that in the next 5 years, we shall be spending close to about 28 billion rands to upgrade our infrastructure. As it were, most of our budget goes into pipelines, pipeline assets, because as I indicate, we've got about 3,000 kilometers of that. We also make an allocation for automation assets, building property, civil infrastructure, electrical assets, mechanical assets, process assets, and IT. They make our capex. We do this on a yearly basis. We look then into the horizon and say what is therefore needed. So the infrastructure that we have today is informed by the demand of yesterday, and the infrastructure that we're building is meant for the demand of the future. Next slide, Douglas. As we speak, in Vereeniging, we are building System 5A. Is going to give us an additional 600 megaliters of water a day next year. Go back. So this plant, it's meant to provide water, not only for now, tomorrow, but into the future. It's sufficient for the number of consumers that we have. So there have been questions, why is rainwater not upgrading? We are upgrading. We are putting infrastructure for treatment into place. System 5A is going to give us additional 600. From there, we are already, in terms of our life cycle asset management, we are planning and designing for System 5B that is going to give us another 600 megaliters of water a day. This is to meet the current and the future demands, and this system is going to be running in the next year or so. Next slide. Over and above, just in terms of high level, over and above what we are doing in terms of our infrastructure upgrade to augment the system, we are renewing our infrastructure through our renewable program. We are adding Vlakfontein Reservoir that's going to give us a capacity, additional capacity of 210 megaliters of water that you're going to be additionally storing in those reservoirs. So we are augmenting. We have a plan, and then we have been having a plan. Next slide, please. Right. In this slide, I just wanted to share with what has been budgeted as I indicate, the budget is informed by the demand for the municipalities and our consumers, and what have we been providing in terms of the volumes of water into the system. This graph shows from 2018 to the first quarter of this financial year, 2023. Our financial year started in July. The first quarter of 2023, we have been providing water more than what is budgeted. So the question is, why is Rainwater not giving us? We are giving you water, we are providing water, not on budget, beyond the budget. We have these volumes that are informed by our tariff, that are informed by affordability, that are informed by water availability in the catchment. We make a plan. In those plans, it talks about the volume of water that we should be supplying in a particular year. And you can see here, if you draw a straight line from 2018 to now, we are supplying more than what is budgeted. We are pushing and providing more water than what is requested. So if you look at this linear line that starts from 2018 to 2022, you will see, if you draw a straight line, that year on year, in terms of our variance as a percentage increase, we are putting more water than the budget. In the quarter under review, July, August, September, you will see of all the percentage increase over a period of time, we have put more water, 5% more in one quarter than the water that we had planned to provide. So we do have the ability. We have planned, even for the high demand season, to supply 4,262. We are supplying 4,486 megaliters of water. We are pushing more water during this peak time. Because of the heat wave, we have pushed, we are pumping out to our maximum capacity, over and above what we had budgeted for in this quarter. And you can see the differential between these two graphs in relation to other periods is a lot higher. So we have responded to the need to put more water. We have put more water. We have not reduced water. There's a perception that rainwater is water shading. We're not shading. Shading is reduction. We are not reducing water. We have not reduced water. We have put more water into the system in the contrast. Our plant availability is at 80%. Our plant reliability is at 80%. So we don't have a problem of shutdowns. We are pushing more water into the system, more than what we had planned for, more than what we have requested. So rainwater is not reducing. Rainwater has not reduced. All that we have said is that look at the amount of water that we've put into the system. Beyond this, you're going to have a problem. The system is going to crash. We have heeded the call to put more water, but beyond this, we need to look at curtailing. And when we talk restrictions, we're not talking restrictions to reduce. We're talking restrictions to say we have put more water. What we have now, we have to manage differently. Because you'll see later on, if we empty all our reservoirs, we just have no water, no head, no pressure to supply all the high-lying areas. So when we talk about this curtailment, rather we call it curtailment, not water shading. When you're talking about water curtailment, we are saying, leave it here. We have put more. Beyond this, there's just not enough infrastructure. We have provided water. We have planned for the peak. We have put more water into the system, more than what we had planned for in the peak season. So we have come to a point where we don't want the system to crash and leave everybody without water. Let us use what we have. Let us share it. Let's use it responsibly until such time we get out of heat waves, until such time that it starts raining, until such time that we started seeing less and less of water usage, drinking water usage to water the lawns. Until such time that we get out of that, given the amount of water that we are providing, we are saying, let us make sure that this water that we put into the system is used sparingly. In this light, what we have done, to make a point further, we have shown that quarter on quarter, from quarter 2 of 2022 to quarter 1 of 2023, 4 quarters in one financial year, Look at how much of water have we put into the system. Look at how big that jump is. We have not seen this jump in a long period of time. Why? Because we had planned for peak demand. Why? Because we have infrastructure to provide water. Yes, we saw it, and yes, we are providing more water. So we are putting more water into the system. So don't go around telling people we have reduced water. We have not reduced water. We have added more. And the numbers don't lie. Quarter on quarter, year on year, Renota is pushing more water into the system. Next slide, please. What we've done, we've drawn the same graph. You're saying, let's just take volumes of water sold from quarter 1 in 2018 to quarter 3 in 2023. That graph suggests, it's not suggests, it actually says that we are putting, in relative terms, absolute values, more water into the system. And then we can even see that our view, if you look at year-on-year growth, in terms of the actuals over a period of time, same line, it shows an upward trajectory. So rainwater is pushing more water into the system. Next slide. What I've done in this one, I've asked the team to just take the volumes from soon after winter, let's say July, August and September, that we have been providing into the system. You can see from August 2022 to September 2022, there's this sharp rise of the water that we're putting into the system relative to what we had budgeted for. So from July, August, September, there's been a sharp rise. We have been meeting this demand. We have been providing this demand. But what we're starting to see is the demand going that way. That from the resource point of view is not available, and that from affordability point of view, it's not doable. And then we'll show in terms of the slides later on that our municipalities and our people and our consumers are facing serious hardships in terms of paying their water bill. And we're starting to see those numbers in our top line. So we are seeing that the more water that we push into the system, the more water that we provide, our debtors days are going the wrong way. Our debtors days are now sitting at 80. Before summer, they were sitting at 70. So there's a request to put more water, and we're putting more water, but you'll see in the later slides, our debtors days are going the wrong way. Many years ago, our debtors days were sitting at 30 days, but they're now sitting at 80 days. So there are economic hardships we are seeing in our numbers out there from the people that we are providing more and more and more water. And that is why our view was that we need to look at different ways of managing the water that we have. Sparingly, we share it, and we are mindful that this does not even come here, it's limited, and we have serious climate conditions as we speak. So our view is that what needs to happen, what must we do? Our view is that we need to conserve what we have. This slide, very busy slide, but I'll try to make it simple. We're currently abstracting at about 1,680 million cubic meters of water per annum. In a layman's language is 1,680 million thousand liters per annum. We're talking, yeah, the thousand, say, one, it's a lot of water. Let's do it again. 1,680 million thousand liters of water a day. That's what we're abstracting per annum. Our license, it says we must be abstracting at 1.3, we're abstracting at 1.6. The department is saying, please come at 1.6 so that we give you a license at 1.6. The license that we've been given temporarily by the department is to enable us to abstract at 1.680, which is where we are abstracting. The rate in here, it shows that there are challenges to maintain this abstraction within the raw water resources that we have. The request to use water sparingly and conserve water will push our demand to here. What does it mean? It means if our demand curve, if we use water sparingly, we conserve it, we will have a different projection, not that projection. If we have that projection, it means we need to build more infrastructure. If we build more infrastructure, it means we'll have to pay more for water. The easiest way out is for us to conserve water, to move this curve into here. If we don't, we're going to build more dams. Pudihad is coming, and then we're going to build additional infrastructure later on to make up for this demand that has got wastage in it. So we are not blaming our consumers. We can't do that. They are our customers. We don't blame customers. We are saying to our customers, we are encouraging them to say, we think it will be a wise thing to use the water that we have sparingly. Watch what we do with our water. As much as possible, refrain from using it from non-drinking water, because in the long run, it's going to help us as consumers. We will not need this infrastructure. If the consumption is high, we're going to have to build additional infrastructure. We're going to have to build more dams. And when we build more dams, it comes out of our own water tariff. We will have to pay it. We cannot talk economic hardships and still demand that we build more dams, but we all know we are struggling with economic hardships in the country at this point in time. The smart thing, the wise thing to do in all cities of the world, whether you talk Los Angeles, whether you talk Brisbane, that's what they do. They have said we're going to adopt sound water conservation and demand management practices so that to deal with issues of climate change, environmental impact, but to deal with affordability, we are going to look at different ways of doing it. Many countries have moved away from using drinking water to water their lawns. The currently occurring lawn in South Africa is kukui grass. It's an invasive plant. The beautiful lawn that we are watering our yards, big yards with, is alien invasive. That alien invasive that we feed drinking water, that we should be drinking, consumes more water than indigenous lawns. So when we talk about it's not raining, the water consumption is going hard, it has nothing to do with the dams. What happens, because by and large, the people of Gauteng have got automated sprinkler system. They sense the humidity. If the humidity drops, the sprinkler systems go. And because you're watering kukui grass, the cycles run longer. And if you run the cycles longer, you're emptying the reservoirs. And what happens? The low-lying areas in the municipalities consume more. You're dropping the levels, you're dropping the head in the reservoirs. It doesn't pressurize water to reach high-lying areas. So if you go into every municipality, there is water. If you go into every suburb, there is water. Parts of a suburb, mostly high-lying areas, are the ones that we have without water, because we are putting water. We are putting more water. Why is that happening? The low-lying areas are taking more water. And ladies and gentlemen, it's not for drinking purposes. We're not seeing people drinking more water. We love people to do so. But we are seeing water going into non-drinking purposes in that end of the value chain. So when the reservoirs drop, you don't build a head. The people in the low-lying areas consume more water, and then water doesn't reach high-lying areas. Every municipality, every suburb has got water. Only high-lying areas are struggling because of that. Because low-lying areas are taking water, they're consuming more water. The system is not pressurized by the reservoirs level, because what happens, most municipalities don't have secondary booster. They rely on the volumes in our dams. As soon as they drop, the pressure decreases and the water doesn't pass from through lower-lying areas to high-lying areas. And to rub salt into the wound, during high peak demands, the sprinkler systems run, the swimming pools are being filled. That is why in summer, you have a problem, and in winter you don't. You are not seeing people drinking more water. If they are, maybe a megaliter of water here and there. But what we're seeing in summer, particularly when it's not raining, is that the sprinkler systems are running. I'm going to show you in the graph later on. The last 2 days, our reservoirs are filling up. What has been the difference? The difference is that when it rains, the sprinkler system are shut down and the reservoirs pick up. When it gets hot, the sprinkler system go, the reservoirs drop. And I will show you in terms of the volumes in the next slides. What we have done, can you just press it again? We have looked at the research that has been done independent from rainwater that compares our consumption as South Africa, as Gauteng, to the rest of the world. It's not that we don't have enough water, but the issue is, where does the water that we provide go to? On average, South Africa consumes 233 liters per capita per day, compared to an average of 173 per capita per day. This includes developing and developed countries. In Gauteng here, this research says we are using 305 liters per capita per day. This is the water that we pump in the main during peak demand season. So there is enough water that we're putting in the system to go around for everybody. The issue is, how are we allocating it? What happens to that water when you get to municipalities and the suburbs that's creating water? It must be shared. It must be evenly distributed, because the system is integrated and intertwined. We don't have a pipe that takes water direct to parts of a suburb. So our consumption in South Africa is still relatively high in terms of other countries. It's precisely because we use drinking water for non-drinking water purposes. Next slide, please. And can you press the next 3? What we've also done is to do what you call a water use efficiency index, and look at our municipalities in terms of where they are and where they should be in terms of our license. We established a project 1600, where we sit with our municipalities, we look at their programs, we share our expertise with them to try to bring their consumption to an abstraction number that the department will be happy, or not the department, but the resource will be able to yield in the long term. We have requested the City of Joburg to reduce their consumption by 1,355 megaliters of water. The City of Ekurhuleni has to reduce per day their consumption by 1,021 megaliters of water a day. The City of Tshwane just under 700 megaliters of water a day. So we need, and this does not mean we are saying people must not be with water. We need to go into suburb by suburb, neighborhood by neighborhood, understand where the consumption is, use drinking water mainly for drinking water purposes. Try as South Africans to move away from watering our lawns with drinking water. Plant vegetables, do things differently. We don't have a problem with vegetables. We love vegetables because they also assist with subsistence farming. So vegetables don't, most of our big problem is non-drinking water, purposes for drinking water. So we are working with these municipalities. We work with them to say, let's use our water efficiently so that we can get into our license target. But the minister has already approved for us going forward. Next slide. Right, I think I just thought with the little time that we have left is to share with you the peculiarity of this water that we're talking about. When the astronauts go into space, they look at the Earth, they see just blue. Blue. The Earth is blue because the Earth is covered by water. Over 70% of the water of the Earth is covered by water. Unfortunately, about 97% of that water is seawater. It's not fresh water. It's not water that you can quickly purify and drink. It's water that needs to be desalinated, high energy, high cost, with brine. There is a problem after this. 97% of the water is seawater. It's not fresh water. We are in the heartland of South Africa. We cannot, at this point in time, get water from the sea, treat it, bring it here. We cannot afford it. As the people of Gauteng, it's going to be too expensive. So 90% of the water that we have in the earth is seawater. It's not fresh water. Of the fresh water that we have, only 2% of that water, of the 97, from 97, of course, you're left with about 3%. That is fresh water. About 2% water is in the poles. We love to move that water from the poles into here, but it's mission impossible. So we only have 1% of the water to go about for everyone on earth. We have to use that water responsibly. That water because water operates in a water cycle. Well, Earth reuses water. The Earth does not get new water into the planet every year. It reuses water. The water that we drink in, that we consume as fresh water, is the water that has been consumed by dinosaurs. Millions and millions of water, millions and millions of years before us, before humankind. So what happens in the cycle? It evaporates, condenses, it rains, the water comes back. In the next slide, you'll see the problem with South Africa is that where it evaporates, we have a high evaporation, one of the highest evaporation, but it does not rain where it evaporates. So we have an uneven distribution of rainfall. That is why we get water from Lesotho, because you see in Gauteng it's getting yellowish, a light blue, because we have an uneven rainfall pattern. So Gauteng does not have its own water, it gets water from Lesotho because of this unevenness of water distribution in the value chain. Our mean annual rainfall in South Africa is almost half the international mean annual rainfall. So we just don't have enough water to last us for a lifetime, and then we have to use this water for the generations that come after us. Next slide, please. Right. In this slide, I'm trying to attempt to explain why when the dams are full, are we having problem? The dams are full. Why is not everybody having water? I think we need to understand why the dams are built. The dams are not built for one season. The dams are built for seasons. The water that we have now in the dams during this high rainfall season, it must last us throughout the non-rainfall season. Here in Gauteng is winter. If we have drought, like we are seeing now in the outer years, we have to use that water. So it does not mean when the dams are full, you have to empty them. It means when the dams are full, you must use that water that you have. In summer, in winter, and with climate variability that we see, you must also use it in summer. It has not been raining that much, in fact at all, since the rainfall season. We are drawing on the water that we have been storing in the last season. So the water that we have, ladies and gentlemen, is important, that we have to understand that we have to use this water to last us during that cycle. This water must last us. Should we have drought in the next drought season? So dams are built to store water, not for a season, but for seasons. Dams are built to store water, not for a heat wave, but for anticipated drought conditions that may arise. So we have water in the reservoir. They're not in the reservoirs. We don't have water in the reservoirs. We have water in the dams. We have water in the dams, but that water must be used over a period of time. So before we over abstract, we check how is water being used currently. If it's elevated, and if it will not last us through this season, we request, and this is where we are, to say use that water sparingly, because the water that we're going to have may not last us until the next rainfall season. Why? Because of climate change. We all know in Gauteng, the 1st of September, it used to rain without fail. The whole of September it did not rain. We went into October, it did not rain. It's starting to rain now. So we have serious climate variability. We have to guard the water that we have in our reservoirs to last us a little longer. So the issue here is not that we don't have water. The issue here is us coming in and saying we are meeting the peak demands, but the peak demands that we are meeting, we are seeing the requirements for more and more water. Let's use what we have sparingly to last us for that time. We don't have a shortage. We have high consumption. And what we are also seeing, as we all know, in terms of the studies that we have been made, the water that we put into the system at municipalities, it's a known fact, 30% of this goes to non-revenue water. 30% of it is lost. And when it gets to the home, 49% of it goes into the garden. So all that we are saying is that while the municipalities are working long and hard, we hope they will have a lot bigger budget to deal with non-revenue water. They all have plans to deal with non-revenue water. Water that we put into the system, 30% of it goes into leaks. It goes literally into waste. And the little that we have that comes to our consumers, it has to be used responsibly. So we cannot therefore say, let us abstract more. If we abstract more to meet one demand, peak demand, we're going to struggle to meet other peak demands. So it is important to understand, yes, the dams are full. And yes, rainwater is putting more water. What we're doing with the curtailment, we're saying, what we have now, let's share it. Let's guard it jealously. Let's make sure that it goes for drinking purposes only. So it's not blaming. Please, journalists, we are not blaming our consumers. We are saying, please come on board, partner with us. Let's use what we have sparingly for it to last a little longer, particularly during this climate variability as a result of climate change. Next slide, please. So I've already explained why curtailment. Part of it is because we don't know what is coming. This slide, as I indicated, that we have been pumping more water into the system. But what we're seeing with this red line, this is the reservoir capacity. This is now the water, the clean water that we store for our municipalities. The reservoir capacities have already dropped. So we are putting more water, but not only that, and that's part of our planning for high peak. Put more water, but draw more from the reservoirs. So we have anticipated it, that this thing is coming. So we're trying to keep our water between 60 and 80% to meet the peak demand. But you will see, as soon as we start getting into summer period, this graph drops. If this graph comes here, somebody was saying our system is crashed. Our system has never crashed. We have enough water, we're pumping more water. The system has never crashed. So we need to understand that our reservoirs are sitting just above 30%. And when we impose restriction, we're seeing this line going completely down. We don't want this line to be here. Because if the reservoirs run empty, you're going to have a serious water shortage. Those that have water will be without water because they rely on the head in the reservoirs in terms of their pressure. We want these figures to be here. What we are seeing as well during this period of time, and this is why we want to have water, we all know that we have electricity supply challenges in South Africa. Every single day we have trips. Every single day, most of our secondary plants are affected by load shedding. But not every single day we are without water. Everybody still gets water because of the water that we store in the reservoirs. So when we have interruption, like we had interruption, we're still pumping because we are using the water in the reservoirs. We would like to have this number to come here. When this number is in this bracket, we are able to absorb the NOx. The many trips, we are able to absorb the NOx as a result of load shedding. Not that we didn't have water. We always had water. We are having water, but we want this water to be in the safe zone. That is why the curtailment. This peak that we're seeing here, explain the phenomena that I've just explained. In the last 2 days, it has been raining in Johannesburg. Look at the reservoirs are picking up. Why? Because the sprinkler systems are not on. They are off. As soon as they come off, water is saved in our reservoirs. So the curtailment that we want is to have this into here. We'll still be pumping more, we'll still be meeting the peak demands, but we are saying, let's use what we have sparingly. Let's share it. Let's use for drinking water purposes so that we have enough head and we have enough storage to take NOx, because we'll be having enough water in our reservoirs. So I've already spoken about this, but what has exacerbated also this challenge in terms of having us, if we go back to the previous slide, when we start summer, we like our reservoirs to be around about 90. We pump and make sure that we have our reservoirs between 60 and 90 or 80 if you're lucky. But you can see we've been struggling to get them up there. We are pumping every single time when we don't have disruption, power disruption, the reality of it is that we have been. So this year you are feeling the knock because we have not been able to push our reservoir capacity to 90%. So this drops, and therefore we don't have enough water into the system during this peak demand, because we will not have gotten our reservoirs to 80-90%. So the public
cases, they were unable to fulfill that, need. But now people have just been around, looking around, hoping for this drama to end so that their day can finally get underway. They are around the town.
From load shedding, they agreed to assist us to alleviate problems of water supply as a result, in part, of many interruptions of electricity in our value chain. Next slide. As I'm about to finish, I just thought we should just talk the numbers to say all this increase in volumes that we have met, what impact has it had to our numbers, our financials as at today. What we have seen, starting with debtors days, as I indicated, we're sitting at 77. We're pushing more water into the system. Our debtors days are going the wrong way. When I started in rainwater about 10, 15 years ago, our debtors days were sitting at 35%. Our debtors days are sitting at 80 days. So we have a serious economic hardship suffered by our municipalities, and it's a function of what we are seeing with the tough economic conditions that our people are experiencing. So we are pushing more water, but our debtors days are going the wrong way. Our debtors book as we speak is sitting at about 5.2, just under 5.3 billion, and our accounts overdue outside the current account is 3.3 billion. So our total net trade receivable is about 3.1 billion. We are providing for what we call expected credit loss. In terms of accounting standards, they provide that we must provide, they dictate that we must provide for that cost in our income statement, and therefore it does affect our bottom line. If it affects our bottom line, we don't have enough surplus to upgrade, refurbish, operate, and maintain. So although we have seen an increase in volume of the water that we're putting, but we are seeing our debtors days going the wrong way. Next slide, Douglas. Thank you. So what we have done, we've looked at municipalities in terms of their payment level and their consumption. We are seeing that Johannesburg Water has been able to pay their current bill, the overdue bill, in time, 100% flow. Thank you to Johannesburg Water. 30 days, they've kept it for a number of years. So we're receiving our payment in time, but you'll see in other municipalities, starting with Ekurhuleni, we are seeing that our debtors days for a number of years has been around 30 days, but we are seeing that hardship coming through in the city of Ekurhuleni. Debtors days going to 59. We'll go to Tshwane, go back, Douglas. So what we are saying here, we are seeing, you've gone forward. Yeah, go back. You must be coming from Tshwane. You don't want to see the numbers from Tshwane. Yeah. So city of Ekurhuleni, we are seeing economic hardship with our second biggest customer. And we are pushing more water into the system, but that is not commensurate with our revenue. That is not commensurate with the money that comes back. So we are meeting peak demands, we are pushing more water, but we are creating a different problem. I don't know if we're trading recklessly, but we are giving water, but we are not paying. We're not getting paid. And we're meeting the demands, but we are seeing that there are hardships. That is why our clarion call to say, perhaps we need to use what we have sparingly to what we can afford to keep us going. There is no point giving me water, drinking water to water my lawn, and then I struggle to pay for that bill. Or my municipality struggle to pay that bill. So it's not shifting the blame. It's saying, look at what you consume. Look at your economic hardships. Look at the challenges in the municipality. And let's work on changing our behavior. So debtors days for City of Ekurhuleni has gone the wrong way, but we're very happy 2021 it closed at 21. But you can see this pattern that our municipalities are also starting to feel economic hardship pinch. Next slide. In Tshwane, we are seeing the same pattern. Tshwane in recent times has been struggling to pay the accounts on time. We have been very lucky for a number of years. Tshwane has been coming at around 31 days, but you are seeing that the more we put, the more we have issues of debtors days. So that is why our view is that the water that we give, instead of demanding more, because you are having financial difficulties in terms of paying your debtor's bill on time, use what you have sparingly. Watch very closely and guard jealously the drinking water that goes into the municipalities. So in essence, apart from Joburg City, we're starting to see the second, the third, in fact the fourth biggest customer, eMfuleni, next slide, is having a lot more hardship. The second, the third, and the fourth are having serious challenges. 10, 15 years ago, debtors days of eMfuleni, our fourth biggest customer, was 31 days. It's sitting at 237 days, coming from a record high of 365 days. So again, it is important to understand that the more we push, the bigger the bill, and therefore the hardships that come with paying that bill. Next slide, please. Right, what we are seeing as rainwater, to summarize this slide, is that all these hardships and late payments have had an impact on our declining and have eroded our GP, gross profit margin. As our operating costs grow, you see our tariff is growing at about 8%. Our total cost, operating costs, are growing at about 12%. There's a big gap there. So if you have debtors days that are going the wrong way, a tariff that is lower than the total costs, it means you're going to have serious challenges going forward. In the foreseeable future, it will create a challenge for us to provide more and more water. Next slide. Yeah, in this slide, we're just giving the numbers that you may know, that we estimate that the non-revenue water in the municipal space is about 40% to be between 3 and 4 billion. So we are working long and hard. We have to assist and work with our municipalities to bring the non-revenue water down. Our non-revenue is about 7%, which is within the world standard. Municipal non-revenue water. By non-revenue, we're talking water losses. It's in the region of 30 to 40%, as Water Research Commission indicated in one of their recent studies. Next slide. Right, in conclusion, we are saying rainwater has on year produced more water than budgeted by its customers, and then we have shown that in the numbers. This is underpinned by a very robust infrastructure, life cycle asset strategy that we have that ensures that we meet the demands and we plan for the infrastructure. We have planned for infrastructure, we are planning for the infrastructure. That is why we are able to supply high demand. The increase in water requirements are made up of high non-revenue water and non-drinking water requirements that we are seeing in this period of time. The current high water requirements are not sustainable going forward for us as rainwater as an institution. High non-revenue water by municipalities must be sufficiently budgeted for. We must tackle that head on. Water usage for non-drinking water, particularly during high peak demand, must really effectively be stopped. The high water utilization is not affordable by consumers in municipalities given the current economic situation that we're seeing in South Africa. So I'll pause here, ladies and gentlemen. The long and short of the brief is that we have been pushing more water. We have not reduced water. We have not shared water. We are requesting and imposing curtailments because there is more and more and more over and above the peak that we have been able to budget for. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, CE, for a very detailed presentation. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I see Babes Rosendal was already asking a question. I was hoping that the presentation is very detailed. There's no need for questions. Okay, while our leadership is going back to the seat, colleagues, the mics, I need mics. Can you just start this side? So we will be taking questions. Justice, I don't know, Justice, are you here? Okay. Okay. And then Judith, also we need somebody who's going to scribe, taking, writing down questions. Mics, we've got mics. So before you ask a question, maybe introduce yourself, which media house you're representing, ask your question, and then we'll take, maybe let's start right in the middle, we'll take about 3-4 questions. Then we'll give our panelists an opportunity to respond to their questions. Can we start with you, Griselda?
Thank you. I'm Griselda Rivers from SABC Television News. CEO, thank you for outlining what your responsibilities are. And in part of that presentation, you spoke about the fact that it is not you as Rand Water that determines where the water should be switched off, but it's the municipalities who have that responsibility. But still, as a water utility, I think South Africans would appreciate the particular areas that you service. How much water do we have left? You keep pumping, but are you able to tell me and say, I, as Rand Water, currently only have water to sustain you for 80 days. Stop overusing. Can you give us the specifics? We appreciate the presentation, but there are communities out there that are sitting without water. And on the second issue, while these are municipalities that you say have that responsibility to decide where water would be switched off, a number of communities, if you go to social media as well, you'd be able to see the complaints. What is the extent of it? And for how long are we seeing some of these communities being shut off for? While some of this may not fall into your area of responsibility, I think it would be insane if you as a water utility didn't know what the true extent of this crisis is. Thank you.
Okay. Can we take a second question?
Yes, Madam Saudi from Newsroom Africa. Just a few questions, if I may. I'm curious in terms of, you made in the presentation allusions to the fact that you rely on, dams and other water retaining facilities, where you paint a picture of where our water levels currently are as Rand Water. Have you considered perhaps even adding additional kind of water supply or water retention facilities? I know that groundwater sources are also available, specifically in Gauteng. We know that in Katoris, for instance, there's been an issue with groundwater and the type of rock that that particular township and area rests on. We know that because of the groundwater, it's been eroded. I don't know if that groundwater is usable or can be salinated accordingly, but is it something that you're looking into? But also, in terms of farming communities as well, your example looked at municipalities. What is the intake or uptake in terms of your resources for farming communities? I know out in the LIVESTREAM, Mkhali City's got one of the biggest farming communities. One wouldn't think Gauteng would have, but certainly there's a huge farming community there. And what is their uptake in terms of the resources? And finally, when you look at so-called problem municipalities like Sidibeng and Fuleni, where infrastructure management also contributes to what is a challenge for the water resources. You made an appeal for people not to use sprinklers and things like that willy-nilly, but when you look at the management of infrastructure, are you talking to the national department as Rand Water in terms of their upgrade of infrastructure, whereby we see the water pipes being burst, where we see sewage facilities not being maintained? and water then being wasted in that particular issue. How far are those talks, and what is the response there? Thank you.
Okay. Can I take a question
Sure.
and then we move to the last one? And then we'll get a panelist to respond, and then we'll take another round of questions.
You sure punch here from News 24. I've got a few questions and a comment. Firstly, just with regard to, you were saying that we're overusing water, or consumers are using a lot of water, and you used cities as examples of restrictions such as Los Angeles and Brisbane. But Los Angeles, under the droughts in April of this year, their average water use per citizen was 223 litres per day, which is only 10 litres less than what we use. And that's in a massive drought and a very, very difficult situation, more so than us. So, I mean, I don't know, it doesn't seem like encouraging consumers to reduce what seems like normal usage is the solution here. The other thing is what's your response to the issue that water is by definition going to be required for any kind of economic growth within the RAND and within Gauteng, and it's not going to be possible without a surplus supply of water. What is your response to the lack of development that might happen if we have to curtail our water usage moving forward? That's it for me for now.
Okay, good. Then we'll take a last question, and then we'll give a panelist an opportunity to respond.
Hi there, it's Julia Evans from the Daily Mail. Thank you so much for that presentation and for inviting us here. I think from what I understand and from what Joe before is presenting to us, the root of this problem is power failures, not load shedding, but power failures from the two plants in Gauteng. So what caused those power failures specifically is what I want to know. So I think there was 4 that happened in the 2 plants in and the other one in Gauteng. So what caused that? And just to double check that those are national key points that are exempt from load shedding. I know the localized infrastructure in the other municipalities has load shedding, but those ones don't have load shedding. I just want to check. So yeah, what caused those power failures? And like you rightly said, we're now going to be entering El Nino. We're in El Nino, we're going to be reaching El Nino, which is going to be a drier period. So what are the plans that Water has to make sure that when we enter this drought period, we're not going to face water restrictions? I agree that we should sort of promote a foster culture of conservation with water, definitely, especially under the climate crisis. But a lot of climate scientists have pointed out that this heat wave that we're experiencing right now is not actually really unprecedented. There are usually heat waves between the transition from spring to summer before the rainy season hits. So if these power failures never happened originally, would we be facing these restrictions, is what I want to know. I think that's what I can do. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we still have more questions? Okay, right. Let's just get responses and then we'll do the second round of questions. Okay, and if there is a mic here. No, you can just like this.
Yeah, I think just starting maybe with the last question. If we didn't have power failure or failures, what are the root cause of those failures? Particularly in Vereeniging, yes, Joburg Water is right. We had quite a number of power trips in our purification works. Yes, also you're correct, we are exempted from load shedding, but we have not been getting good quality of power with a good power correction factor that comes into our system. So although we are exempted, we are experiencing a lot of trips. And we must understand, in our trip, it means we are 1,000, we have to take 1,000 megaliters of water a day and divide it by 24 hours. That will give you the volume of water that we lose at any given time. We are 24/7, 365 business. We don't close. We pump water all the time. So if we have a power trip that lasts for a period of time, it does affect. And as I indicated in the presentation, we have been experiencing a lot of these in our purification works. They do have an impact because from Vereeniging we pumped to Ekenhof. Ekenhof system supplies Johannesburg water. So if we have a power outage, it means Ekenhof is going to struggle. We have to then look at other systems to assist that. During high peak demand, as I correctly mentioned, it didn't catch us by surprise. But when the reservoirs are low, and the reservoirs, as I indicated earlier, we keep water at 80%, 90% in the reservoirs to cushion us during this period of heat wave. So when we're having a lot of trips, you are not able to build water into the reservoirs. And when you get heat wave, your reservoirs are already running dry. As at Sunday, we had another trip when we're trying to push more water into the system. So it does affect them. So there is correlation between the challenges that we have in terms of putting water into the system and the power outages. So yes, we are a national key point. Vereeniging and Zuikerbosch are not subject to load shed. And as you rightfully say, the rest of our business is not national key point. We do experience a lot of load shedding. We grappled, for example, with Mogale City at one stage because we had backup generators in that area. There was just not enough to keep going because when you trip, they don't kick in immediately. And then the reservoirs that supplies those areas also ran very low. There was water that is coming into Mogale City, but lying areas were struggling. So part of what we've been doing with municipalities, particularly in Mogale City, is to look at different ways of being exempted from load shedding in those infrastructure because it has an impact on our ability to supply. So the root cause of those failures, it's their trips. We're not getting good quality water from. In Vereeniging we get supplied not directly by Eskom, but by Mfuleni. Mfuleni gets power from Eskom, and then when we have a trip, we call Mfuleni. Mfuleni tries to find out where Eskom is. They come in, and then we're back online again. So we have been experiencing a lot of those. And by last count, we had one on Sunday. So I think as much as possible, we don't want to have that. And they become more profound during high peak demand. So in winter, you don't see them because the demand is low. We're able to cushion them with water that we have. But now it's high, the consumption is high, and then you feel that effect. So there is a direct correlation between filling the reservoirs and supplying water and electricity. The water for economic growth, really, if we look at, maybe we should talk the numbers. We're talking 222 liters per capita per day. We are consuming in Gauteng 300 liters per capita per day. So we're talking a difference of 100 liters per capita per day. I'm glad you're checking your numbers. You said 222. We're pushing close to 300 liters per capita per day, if not more in certain instances. That's still high, brother. So I think if you really want to use an argument like Las Vegas, maybe we should be at 200. We're talking less 100 liters per person per day. So there's no doubt about it. If you look at where we're sitting per capita per day, that number is still relatively high. If the desert can use 200, surely we can do better. We can go closer to well average. So that number still shows a big difference. Personally, I think there is enough water to go about for everybody. And enough water, in fact, from the economic activity. If you look at our economic activity, the amount of water that we're putting into the system and start breaking it down, I do not understand and anticipate that we'll have hardships going forward, not even in the now, because we're putting more water into the system. And then, of course, we prefer that for agricultural purpose you use raw water instead of drinking water. Precisely because drinking water, we produce drinking water of good quality standard that is not necessarily meant for the purposes of vegetables unless it's raw water. So I think our view is exactly that. But let's use raw water, not drinking water. And that water, most of our farmers get it from the catchment with the license with the Department of Water and Sanitation. With climate change and climate variability, all of us have to adapt. We have to get into adaptation strategy, because not everybody is going to have water for economic activity, for agriculture, for drinking purposes. We need to adjust. Climate change is dictating for us to do so. Industries are adjusting. We're seeing our industries in the main looking at different ways of reusing and reusing the water that we give them, so that it stays long. For economic activities, and this is exactly what you want to do, if we can reduce the capita per consumption per day, it gives us a bigger room for us to grow the economy going forward. But at this point in time, we cannot pinpoint. We don't have the scarcity to a point where we can say no economic growth. And that is why we need to act now. We cannot act when the resource is completely depleted and start doing something about it. So we are doing these curtailments precisely because, not because we don't have water. We have water, but we are saying we need to look at what we're having and producing, distribute it, conserve it, use it wisely, and pressurize it locally, fix the leaks, and all of us have to be on board to make sure that there is economic growth going forward. So from where we're sitting as rainwater, we don't really anticipate that if we practice sound water conservation measures, as a country we'll have a problem going forward. Not at all. There's a question around infrastructure challenges in terms of leaks. I think there's a generic acknowledgement by the municipalities as well, to Mawula, that we have a challenge. What we have done, as I indicated in my presentation, we have what we call Project 1600 with them, where we sit around the table and say, what is the best way of addressing this problem quicker? But in terms of my view, I don't think at municipal level, because of the financial challenges that we have, they are budgeting enough to fix the leaks, to invest in the infrastructure. Water, last I checked, was the second biggest revenue spinner in the municipality. We really want to see those expenditures going into water. So what municipalities do with the money that they collect from water tariffs, they tried to meet other needs in the municipalities with that tariff. So selfishly, as a water practitioner, I want to see in the IDP, water service development, more budget, more allocation that goes to fixing leaks at that level. The municipalities are doing that. Johannesburg, Tshwane, and them, they are doing that. But we need to do more. We need to close the gap quicker. So we are working with them. In the meeting that we had with the minister and the mayors and the MMC, there was a request also for a special grant that perhaps will come from the fiscus directly to municipalities to plug the leaks quicker. So the minister, took that to heart, and there will, I think, at the fiscus level, be discussion to say how can we quickly accelerate that to fix those leaks, and not only talk about this non-revenue water and do something about it. I'm glad you're also mentioning groundwater. I think it's a known fact that as South Africa, we relied too much on surface water for a number of years. And if you look at the Department of Reconciliation studies and some of the projects that we put in place in rainwater that we call growth projects as part of the innovation-driven risk-based strategy, we are looking at groundwater exploitation. We are also trying to decentralize water provision. We are looking at fisher water, so that we're not only dependent on water in the dams, which is surface water coming, as I indicated, outside South Africa, but we exploit the resource. So plans are afoot at both national and our level, and certain municipalities are doing that, so that we soften the burden, for want of a better word, on the surface water. So groundwater is part of our reconciliation studies and part of our augmentation plan going forward to ease the situation of being dependent on surface water and meet the future demands. The result of the extent of the crisis, I think, as at Monday, when I also checked again today, when we had a meeting with the minister, After giving a presentation, the minister gave all the municipalities that were there an opportunity to explain and share with the minister where the challenges are. By and large, Ekurhuleni and Tshwane were fairly stable. The only area that was a challenge as at then was Johannesburg water, specific to a commando reservoir that supplies, I don't know which suburbs, Hest Hill and those suburbs. Those were the ones that were receiving water. From last week, we are pumping more into eNCA. We're currently sitting at 1,200 megaliters. At one stage, we start sitting at 1,000 megaliters of water a day, but we're pushing more water. Our reservoirs are picking up, their reservoirs are picking up, and I was a little bit surprised that there are still areas in that area without water. So we are working jointly with Joburg Water to see what is it from our side that we can use to load shift to assist the commando reservoirs. But at this point in time, we are pumping it at the max. And I did, because the CEO this morning, to check with the MD of Johannesburg Water to say, we hear there are still parts of Johannesburg that are without water. What is happening? So we are attending to it. It may be the levels, it may be the head in the reservoirs, but from our side, as I indicated, you saw that peak. The reservoirs are picking up. So the issue that you are wanting to have as a scoop, we're not moving to day zero. We won't move to day zero. There's just too much water. We're pushing a lot of water into the system. And there's no indication, as you say, from our side, our infrastructure, we're pumping at maximum capacity, 5,000 million liters of water a day to 17 to 18 million people. It's a lot of water. The reservoirs are picking up, the dams are full. The word day zero does not even exist in our vocab. So, as I indicate, I need to emphasize, we are meeting the peak demands, we are pushing more water into the system. All that we are doing is to make sure that the water reaches everybody, and then we have to make sure that where we need to manage sound water management practices to help those that are in the high-lying areas. So if you look at what is happening now and the volumes that we are putting into the system, should be, it is, do your calculations in terms of per capita per consumption, look at the population that we're saving, look at the volumes that we're doing. It's a lot of water. The water is enough to go about to everyone. We need to just work with our municipality to make sure that it reaches everybody. And steady but surely we'll get there. I think for us, as a people, it is a wake-up call to say, we are fortunate we have enough water. We are fortunate we are producing 5,000 megaliters of water a day. We're fortunate. But we need then, when we still have it, find intelligent way of using it to get to everybody, find intelligent way of ensuring that the water that we have lasts us for non-rainfall season and beyond. So our intervention is to say, we have enough water, we are putting more water into the system, but hang on, we're going further in the wrong direction. We must intervene. We must fix the leaks. We must load shift. The municipalities must also invest in their booster systems as well, because when our reservoirs drop, they rely on our head. Although we are putting water into the system, they cannot take it further. So part of the discussions that we had with the minister on Monday is for them to attend to these issues. And our water room, it's actually working on this. Part of the water room is also to bring the private sector on board, to partner with us, to help us send the message across and speak with one voice. Yes, and we are, and we will continuously engage with ESCOM, City Power and municipalities to see and ensure that we are load shed, we are not load shed or exempt to an extent possible. And I think I also need to emphasize this because I saw an interview the other day. Our municipalities are our partners. Although we are responsible for water up to the reservoirs, their problem is our problem. We are on a contact basis every day, and we are solving problems jointly. So I think that needs to be understood. There's no breakdown relationship between us, Johannesburg Water, and anybody. We work in a partnership. And part of the discussion that came out of the meeting of the minister and the municipalities is to, maybe we should outlaw kukui grass as an invasive filling plant. We all know we have a working for water, and that is intended to remove alien species. That is an alien species, and it's a guzzler of water. Those are the questions that I could write down, Mackenzie. Thank you.
I think all the questions have been answered. We can move to the next round of questions. Can we start from here, go that way? Can we get a mic? Thank you.
Just a question, from the presentation, my sense was that quite a lot of the blame is placed on municipalities. Do you think, as rainwater, that municipalities are doing enough
to just ensure that there's enough water conservation? I mean, as you mentioned that you are pumping currently at your maximum, you are meeting some of the demands, but do you believe that municipalities have actually heeded your call in trying to conserve water?
Okay, thanks, Sasha.
Veronica Mafadi from Eyewitness News. I think you just have to forgive me, perhaps maybe for just my lack of understanding. So you're saying you're pumping a lot of water into the system, but then the municipalities are not distributing. But I think for me, the main question is for the residents, when does this come to an end? What is the solution, and when does this come to an end? Where does the solution come from? Just a second question as well is just a little bit more details into your role in the water war room. You've mentioned, of course, well, the minister mentioned that you've sort of been allowed to draw more water from the Bow River side, but how does that now work with municipalities and that distribution issue that you're having with them? And I believe this is for 9 months. What kind of a difference we'll be able to see? And then just back to the infrastructure plan, that 5-year plan that's continuously happening. I can see the difference in the infrastructure that's been put in, but 5 years ago, Coronationville didn't have water. 5 years ago, before that, they're still struggling with water. I mean, how does this change? What is the solution in regards to that? Thank you.
Thanks, Veronica.
Yes, from RFM. I think I've got 2 questions, and the first is around the overdue payments by the municipalities that we've seen. And you've spoken elaborately about the relationship in which you share that, you know, their problems are essentially yours as well. But is there any sort of measure being put into place to squeeze that particular area? I mean, close to $1 billion in some of the municipalities that is overdue is quite concerning, because I think at the end of the day, one can only, you know, presume that that would, you know, boil down to affecting the consumer at the end of the day, because consumers on the ground are saying that we're paying for our water, but essentially municipalities are not paying you for the service in which you subsequently do provide. And I think also then, secondly, if the situation is to get worse than where we already are, because you're saying that you cannot essentially go beyond this point, would you look at perhaps then taking the ropes of these restrictions, because you're saying that essentially now you're not imposing on the municipalities as to when to switch off and when not to? But if the situation does get worse, would you perhaps look at asking if you can, you know, then oversee that process of the restrictions? Ngos.
Thank you. Is the mic on?
It's Alex Patrick here from LIVESTREAM 4. Thank you so much for opening this dialogue. My query was about wastewater treatment. How much of the potable water that we have comes from wastewater treatment? And if you are able to tell us what is happening with the wastewater treatment plant at the Bow River. At one stage, Rand Water was in charge of fixing that issue. I'm not sure who is in charge. If it is Rand Water, Could you let us know where the project is, please?
Thanks, Alex. See?
I'm sitting there, I didn't capture all the questions, so I think the colleagues on the table will assist me. And I just want to talk to Sebastian. Please leave the blame. I think, and maybe somebody will explain different from me. We are not blaming municipalities. As I indicated, we are not blaming consumers. Let's not use the word blame. I think what we're saying is that if you look at what is happening, you have to identify what the problem is, and then we have to work as a collective to resolve it. Because if you keep saying we blame consumers, you're creating an impression that we are saying they are to blame, and therefore the problem sits with me, but I'm shifting the blame onto them. And that confuses consumers. Because every single time you communicate the message, somebody wants to create an impression that you don't have a problem here. You don't have a problem. Use water the way you want to use. The problem is that outfit called rainwater. Because if you're going to use the word blame, for me, it's going to take us back. Because when you say you're blaming somebody, you're saying that person is not doing anything incorrect, but the person that is doing something incorrect is shifting a blame. That's not our approach. Our view is this. Our view is we live in a world of serious climate change. We need in a world of climate variability, extreme droughts, extreme floods. And then you've seen what happened in KZN. And that, including our industry, calls upon all of us, the ministry, rainwater, municipalities, consumers, to look at the way we interact with water and say how best do we use this water to last us for a long time. We have looked at rainwater. We said, in rainwater, what do we need to do? We have a non-revenue water of 7%. That's still high. We don't want to lose a drop. We take responsibility for that. We go into the municipalities, we go into the households. So it's to solve, and somebody asked, to solve this challenge that we have, it requires all of us to work in a partnership. All of us to roll our sleeves, put our shoulders behind the wheel, look at how different we should and be doing things, what is sustainable in the long run, what is the impact of our activities as individuals, to rise above this challenge and take it head on. So we are not sitting here, we didn't call this media conference to blame anybody. We want to say we all need to come on board and find ways in partnership with our consumers, our municipalities, to solve this challenge. It's the reality of the situation that in South Africa we have high non-revenue water. And ours has never been to blame municipalities. Ours have been to spearhead as part of the collective. And this is what we do in the water room. We chair in the sessions, we spearheading it. We are saying, although the non-revenue water is in the municipal space, what do we have to do as a sector? Some of us are saying, let's budget more in the municipalities. We go to councils with our water practitioners because we view ourselves as part of the solution. So we are not blaming. We are saying we have a challenge across the value chain, and we as water practitioners across the value chain, we need to join hands and solve this problem. And we want you, Sibahle, to assist us with that messaging. The messaging that says we have looked at the entire value chain, all as partners, as all water practitioners, we have identified what the challenges are, and then we are working together to solve the problem for us to have water going forward. So I did say in the beginning, there's no way that I'm going to blame municipality. They pay my salary. So I think it is important that we understand that. That it's not so much so about blaming, but so much so about identifying where the problem is. And the facts will show you that non-revenue water is at that side of the value chain, but we need to join hands and solve the problem. So what is the solution? I think, Veronica, I'm going to ask somebody to explain this differently. Our view is that there's enough water that goes around in the system. What we need to do is to manage it differently. The way I see it in the municipal space is that there's enough water that goes into the municipalities, but consumptions in the low-lying areas for non-drinking purposes precludes municipality to get water into the high-lying areas. We need to impose, in my view, I suggest, municipalities need to impose bylaws, particularly during this period of time, to say don't use water for watering your lawns, don't use water, don't use sprinkler system, don't wash the driveways with clean drinking water, because that water, we need it to pass your home to go into high-lying areas. We have to show it's an integrated system. So the solution is exactly that. At this point in time, we need to get water consumption lower as individuals, as municipalities, as utilities, so that it can reach out to everybody, because, as I say, we are putting more water into the system. The overdue payments and the measures that we have put in place, we don't call them squeezy measures. What we're trying to do over a period of time, we have put various mechanisms in place to assist the municipalities to keep up with their debtors days. Historically, particularly before COVID, we were demanding that we paid exactly on the last day of the month. But because municipalities, we all know the municipalities are going through challenges, we have then said, let's take your bill and split it, 60% month end and the rest on the 15th, so that you can balance your numbers. So we have put mechanisms in place, an arrangement with municipalities in place to assist them to pay, but they're still struggling. I don't anticipate us going into their value chain and doing the squeezing. I anticipate us continuously engaging with them, putting mechanisms in place to assist them, by and large, to pay their bills. It is a matter of concern for us. It is a matter that we have raised with our municipalities, with the minister, and the municipalities are also concerned about it, and really we want to bring those debtors days back to a number that is sustainable to see. We may want to oversee that going forward, but I think not in the shortest possible terms. The last question around the wastewater treatment works. Okay. The last one around wastewater treatment works, yes, we have been requested by the municipalities, by the minister in Empoleni to assist with the upgrade, refurbish of these wastewater treatment works. 3 of them, Risprait, Leoke, and Sebokeng. At this point in time, we started with a lot of pump stations to refurbish them. We are finalizing, in fact, we have final designs to go towards upgrading those wastewater treatment works. So we are hard at work with the municipalities in there to attend to the issue of wastewater treatment works. At this point in time, you will have to, but we are not taking any wastewater, treating it and supplying it. There's a lot of non-returned water into the system, into the Val Dam, but we're not doing that at this point in time. What we want to do with our wastewater treatment works in that area is to upgrade them to wastewater discharge standards into the water bodies and get them functioning. I think in the long term, like many developed countries, we can start being smart about it and looking at how we can put it into the systems. Those are the questions that I could pick up. I can also, I think, see if there's anything.
I think we took longer than we expected. Do we still have questions? Yeah. Just one last question. Is this the last question that we have for today? Or then from there we'll... Oh, two questions. Right.
I think this is really important to emphasize, because from my understanding, like I said, everybody, like what you've been saying the whole day, there's enough enough water going into the system of dams and all it's not enough. So for me, what's exacerbated it is localized load shedding and increased demand. But the root cause of it is the power system. I'm still not, you said that what caused these hardships is that you're not going to get good quality power. I don't really know what that means. So I need a specific explanation